Hi, everyone, and welcome to the next edition of our Mediate.com book club. We are delighted to have our good friend, Lucia, presenting with us today, and Claire is going to serve as host. So Claire, let me hand it over to you to kick us off.
Great, thank you. Let's see. So it has been a lot of fun getting to know Lucia. I feel like she's definitely a kindred spirit. And she has pushed so many things forward in the field of dispute resolution. And so I think as a field, I just want to pause and say thank you for everything that you have done. And for everyone that is new coming into the field, I cannot tell you how excited I am for you to read this book. As soon as she mentioned it, I was able to read the PDF. And the second I read the PDF, I turned around and bought the book and said, this is just something I need to have on my bookshelf and refer to all of the time. Okay, I have a bunch of questions, but first I just want to know, what inspired you to write the book?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me at the book club.
Yeah.
This is really, really fun. And of course, my dog has decided he needs attention right now.
Yes.
So what happened is I went on sabbatical this year. I had been in other people's conflict for over 25 years and had this situation that I was dealing with all of last year that just crushed me. And I said to my husband at the beginning of 2022, I said, I'm going on sabbatical. I'm in no shape to be in other people's conflict right now. And I was out trail walking with my dog and I hauled out all the art supplies that you accumulate as a mother over all the years, most of which are unused. And I started making messes with color and painting. And I thought, oh, it'd be fun to do a podcast. And it could be like a teaching podcast on everyday negotiation, for people who aren't lawyers or aren't MBAs. And because I taught negotiation for 10 years at UC Berkeley Law and at UC Hastings, and their name is about to change. And so I went and I got my teaching binder, and it's this 4-inch paper binder. So none of it is scanned. So if my house goes up in a California wildfire, that stuff is
Don't even see it.
All right. So and I started to think, well, how do I want to build this podcast so it's really practical and useful and fun? I wanted to make it fun for people.
Yeah.
And bear in mind, I taught from 2003 to 2013. And here we are, 2022. And as I was flipping through this binder, I noticed something for the first time ever. It was that every single assigned reading for 10 years at those two law schools had been authored by not just a man, but a white man. And I went, whoa, first of all, how is that possible?
Yeah.
And second, how did I not notice it sooner?
Yeah.
So I got in my time machine and I set the dial for 2003. And I said, well, okay, what non-men authors could I have been assigning back in 2003? There was a whole lot of nothing. We had one book that is pretty well known, but really we didn't have much again until about 2015. Then we sort of had 2015, 2018, 2019, 2020. Anyway, once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. And I said, oh, crud, now I'm gonna have to write a book. And now I have to. It's like a moral imperative. And so it was partly that paucity of women's voices in the general marketplace. It was also that I saw, because I haven't read every negotiation book, but I've read a lot of them, but that they tend to be written by the attorney, which, guilty as charged, the MBA, the sales and marketing professional, the retired FBI hostage negotiator, for that audience.
Yeah.
And so in the meantime, we have people who aren't in those groups going, well, I don't know how to negotiate. I would need someone to do that for me. That's a specialized skill, and it's nonsense. It's everywhere and it's every day and it's for everyone. And then there's the superpower part of it, the superhero part of it. And that's not just because I have 2 teenage boys who love Marvel, but it's this aspect of the unremarkable transformed to the remarkable. And this is true for me personally. and about the power of everyday negotiation. I mean, I'm this kid from a small town in Illinois who had the eye patch and was socially awkward and physically awkward and I was such a mess. And here I am today, like wow, transformed. And then the idea that if we can get more people, and especially women, internalizing their voice, that they are an everyday competent and confident negotiator, that is truly transformative.
Yeah. Okay, 2 questions. First, who do you think should read this book? And then second, who were you really picturing when you were writing this book? Like, was there a specific person where you're like, I want to help them?
Right. So those are 2 different questions. Yeah. So it's designed like a layer cake. If you're a novice to negotiating, you just hit pay dirt. It's simply put the most comprehensive, most fun, visually pleasing 21st century negotiation book in the marketplace. And it's packaged as a super snack. It's not going to bog you down. If you're an expert or anything in between the novice and the expert, you're going to learn a few things that you didn't know before, that you haven't thought about. One of my water, it's filled with my 5th grade level art.
It's great.
A new perspective, a new tool. Now, I'll be blunt. Oh, Colin inspired that one.
Oh, the hummingbird one?
True story. Colin inspired it. Yep. I bet he doesn't know that.
I know the origin of it, but I did not know that I inspired it.
Yep. And look, I will speak plainly because you asked. Yeah. I'm definitely trying to reach women and others who have felt excluded. So I've actually received 3 messages so far from men one in Singapore, one in India, one in Nigeria, who have said to me, I'm so grateful for this book, Lucia, because I've spent my career in workshops where white men are telling me how to get things done. And I thought, oh, wow, I hadn't thought about that audience, actually. Yeah. So I am a woman, I identify as a woman, and I'm trying to reach women and others who have been left out. It's this book of inclusion. And inclusion, it can mean everybody. It can also mean the rest of us. It can also mean those of us who have been left out.
Yeah, good. I told you we were going to sidetrack off of the questions. We're already doing that. Sorry. What I'm wondering, what is your take on women in negotiation? Let's say specifically in the last 5 years, 20, 30 years ago, I think you were right. There was kind of this feel of like, oh, it's the white male that's doing the work and that's writing about it. And that has definitely been challenged over the last couple of decades. But I feel like especially over the last few years, we have seen a major understanding of gender and specifically gender roles. So how do you think that's affected women in negotiation?
Right. I think that first of all, I have to say, I adore men.
Well, that's good.
Let's just put that out there. And we need more diverse voices in this field and in this marketplace. So I have actually noticed that even in just the past 5 years, I have noticed and met too many women in particular who still don't even know how to ask for something. Yeah. Don't even know they're allowed to ask for something. They'll say to me, oh, I can do that. I can ask that. I'm like, yes, you can. What do you think is going to happen if you ask? Are you going to be struck down or vanquished or dissolved like the wicked witch who she was made of brown sugar or something? What do you think will happen if you ask? So there is still a large population of people who are afraid to even ask, who equate negotiation with conflict and therefore avoid it. And a lot of these people are still women. And the data still is showing us that women negotiate their compensation packages 4 times less often than men. And then you add to that, just to pile on, then there's actually a wage penalty for women for each baby. So let's say you do something crazy, like have a baby, then globally, there's actually a 7% wage penalty. In the US, it's 4%. And then conversely, for each baby, men get a wage bump to the tune of 6%. So now the women are still less likely to negotiate their compensation package to start. And then we have this other 10% gap on top of that per child, and it is never made up over time. So it is still happening. At the same time, I think I do see some shifts, and especially in the next generation, in the Generation Z, they are challenging the status quo and the legacy systems, and they are the makers and the activists, especially climate activists. And I am very, very optimistic about them. Women like me, even like me, have literally been put in a corner and not included as recently as last year. And so I think we've had to use other skills that talkers aren't using, that talkers in the room aren't using. So when you say about, I think you asked about maybe the difference in gender skills. People say that women have better intuition. I don't know if that's true. I do know that we have the biological imperative of being the only gender that can grow and produce babies. So we are forced, when in that state, to be very aware of our bodies and the information our bodies is sending us. So this idea of interoception, the information our body is feeding us, is terribly important in negotiation. And that is, I think, something that perhaps women can tap into maybe a little more seamlessly.
I agree. I have a long list of questions, so I'm just pointing out, if anybody else wants to jump in with questions, please do, because I don't want to bogart the entire time. But to follow up on what you were just saying, you give a super tip, and I love these. She has all these little super tips that are called out throughout the book. So it's really easy to just thumb through it and be like, oh yeah, that's a good one. So there's this one about, don't miss the information that your body is communicating. She's long cautioned against hailing rational analysis as the best or the only method of making decisions. Those who can harness the powers of the mind as well as the body and reference them at appropriate moments, they are the next level everyday negotiating superstars. So can you talk a little bit more about that? What does that mean to, I guess, to trust your gut instinct? What does that look like when you're sitting at the negotiation table?
Right. It starts with planning. And the reason the book is ordered the way it is, so the interoception, the spidey senses chapter comes after the planning chapter. Because if you plan for your negotiation, which I think a lot of negotiators might name as the #1 negotiation skill, I actually name it as the #2 negotiation skill, then having that plan as your anchor is what actually frees you up in the negotiation to notice other things. Well, to notice what? To notice other people's communication, other people's facial expressions, how they're reacting, how they're maybe changing from their baseline, and how you are reacting. Because you're not having to compute everything right in the moment. You're not just shooting from the hip. You've got that plan, and you can now say, oh, what is that feeling coming up in me? What is that about? And then we have all these buzzwords that say, oh, well, conquer your fears, get out of your comfort zone, right? In order to have a growth mindset.
Yes.
And I'm saying, don't dismiss when those feelings come up as, oh, well, that's just a fear. I'm just gonna ignore that because that doesn't serve me. It does serve you. Pay attention to it. Maybe ask some more questions. Maybe you need to get a little more information. Maybe you need to check in with someone, get a little reality checking.
Mhm.
And we have mediators here. So this is something as mediators to be looking out for too, with parties that you are able to, you're the one, you're not in the dispute. So you have sort of this luxury of watching them and noticing these things, noticing their facial micro expressions, noticing even a change in breathing or speech pattern, and saying, what's going on there? That's emotional information, because emotions are just another kind of information. They're another type of facts, another category of facts. And as a mediator, it's part of your job, I think, to decode that. And for us to try and decode it for ourselves.
Yeah. It's Jennifer Kresge and I were just having this conversation about how when you're negotiating, or when you're entering a mediation room, or you're about to go into a training, that there's a different feeling there, as opposed, like if something just isn't right. You're going to feel that rush of adrenaline and probably a touch of cortisol, and there's kind of that excitement and the nerves, but there's and that those can be fairly normal, but that if you're feeling an underlying sense of, I'm not looking forward to this, or there's something here that I'm nervous about, that over time, experienced negotiators have said the same thing that you're saying, Lucia, that you have to trust that, because it probably means that something's wrong. You're not prepared, or there's something going on with the other side, maybe just a micro expression that your subconscious picked up on, and you need to spend time there figuring out, are they lying to me? Am I not prepared? What's the underlying thing here? So I'm so glad that you called that out. I agree, Colin. Emotions are just another category of facts, right? Not to be dismissed.
Right. And that's the beauty of mediation, isn't it? That is the power of mediation, is that when parties go to litigation and they're in court, they are handing over their power to their attorney, to a judge or a jury, and to the rules of evidence. And so only the evidence that is considered legally relevant according to the rules of evidence will come in. Whereas in a mediation, all of it is irrelevant. It's not therapy necessarily. It can be therapeutic though. And that you can have a lot more resolution because of those emotional facts getting addressed in that forum.
Yeah, good. Okay, next question from me. How do you see people using these skills, I guess in two different ways, in their career, but also how do you see people using these skills in their everyday lives? Do you have a couple?
All right, so that if I was in a deposition right now, I'd say objection, compound. Speaking of legally relevant, speaking of rules of evidence, that's okay. I'm gonna do it. So let's take the broad and then go to the narrow. So let's talk about everyday lives.
Okay.
Not that career is narrow. That's also broad. Let's take one broad category and then go to the adjacent broad category. It's everywhere. Negotiation is everywhere. It's in the bedroom, the kitchen, the grocery store parking lot. It's at your kid's school. It's at the dinner table with your toddler. It's in the workplace. So people think of negotiation as the big merger deal in a boardroom, or I think I said this before, as conflict. This is a narrow perspective of negotiation that makes you miss out on so much opportunity and connection. Conflict is one category of negotiation, but only one category of negotiation. And I think a lot of times people forget about the deal-making category of negotiation, the creation category, the makers category, of the opportunity of negotiation, even conflict in that category, that's opportunity too. So the more you're practicing it at the dinner table, at the grocery store, at the PTA meeting, the better you're going to be in those larger stake negotiations because it's just like any other muscle. You're not going to get the 6-pack abs by sitting on the sofa and watching the workout video. You got to actually perform the plank twists, and they suck.
Right.
What is going to make you stronger?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then let's move over to career.
Okay.
And you say, so how do people incorporate it into their career?
Yeah.
Maybe the way I initially did, by listening and observing.
Mhm.
I was left out. I was literally told to go sit in a corner, sitting in these meetings with the Longshore men's union. Okay. And I was the only woman in the room.
Right.
Many times I've been the only woman in the room. So not having a voice, I used the tools I had available to me by listening and observation skills. And it made me a secret agent. I know we hear a lot about having a seat at the table and speaking up, especially women. I think talking is overrated. I said the number 2 negotiation skill before was planning. The number 1 is listening. Listening is the number 1 negotiation superpower. Planning is number 2, which I think you might, we've talked about that. And it's funny because I have a story about my law students with planning. But I think there's some aspects of the planning that particularly resonated for you from the book, but we can get to that or not.
Yeah. That was one of my next questions. Let's go there now. Specifically, yes, I want to hear more about the planning, and the specific part that I just love is that give, get, guard technique.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, I'll explain that. So this was part of the planning memos I would assign to my law students for 10 years. They had to turn in a planning memo for each simulation exercise. They hated it. They considered the planning memo tedious, busy work. And I could tell when they'd approached it as a check the box exercise just to get it over with. And I did not care. The point was to develop the habit.
Yeah.
And I am in touch with several of those law students still today. They are law firm partners and global department heads for brand name corporations. And they're like, Professor Kanter, they still call me Professor Kanter, which is adorable. Those planning memos were golden. And I'm like, I know, you're welcome. So the give, get, guard was part of the planning memo that got them thinking about how to plan for the use of information in a negotiation.
I love it.
What information do I need to get from the other side in this negotiation? Now, a lot of people do think of that, and then they stop there about what they need to get, right? Because it's negotiations about what I'm going to get, right? Well, what about the negotiation you need to give? Be prepared for how you're going to contribute information to the negotiation, and what your concession plan might be too.
Yeah.
So what's the order of it? What's the quality of it, of the information? How are you going to communicate that information? Giving information is also really important. It triggers reciprocity. It triggers concession. It helps oil the whole machine. So you've got your give and you've got your get in negotiation. Well, what about the guard? What about the stuff, the information you want to prevent the other side from finding out? And how are you going to guard it? Right. And then there's various ways that I suggest that you can guard it.
Yeah, good. Some of the other questions that have come up, what suggestions do you have when you're working with a reticent negotiator? If something is important to me and I want to talk about it and negotiate, but the other person doesn't, right? They are just fine with the status quo.
Gosh, that sounds like a leverage issue to me in a way. So one of the things that I advise people to think about ahead of time is assess the leverage, at least going into the negotiation. Who do you think leverage favors? Notice I didn't say who has the leverage. Who does the leverage favor at the outset? Because first of all, leverage and power are not the same thing. And leverage is dynamic. So you might be the party who starts off with leverage favoring you, but it could shift. You might not hold on to it. And ask yourself, who has more to lose by not getting a deal? So when you say to me, the reticent negotiator, the one who just won't engage, to me that says, this is someone who doesn't need something from this negotiation. This is someone for whom they have less to lose by not getting a deal because they don't need it. So maybe that means that leverage is favoring them. That's one idea I have. Another idea I have is stylistic. It could be their style. And I also advise people to assess their natural negotiating style. And there's an instrument we used to use at the law school for that. You've probably heard of it. People here have probably heard of it, the Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instrument. Now I know that word conflict is in there. That's okay. That doesn't bother me. And there were 5 categories of styles, and one of them was avoiding. And I remember how the law students who would test as avoiding as their dominant style, they were super bummed because they were like, oh, that's not strong. That's not, what a zealous advocate, a gladiator attorney should be like. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. All of the styles are useful. All of them have pros and cons. And you can if you understand your own negotiating style, and then you can actually learn to navigate among the others, to match the parties, to match the personalities, to match the context and the circumstances. That's next level negotiating. So just imagine, I would say to them, how effective having an avoiding style could be in a negotiation with someone who's dominant in a competing style. Right? That competing style person is likely to become pretty frustrated. And what happens when they get frustrated? I'll tell you, because I've seen it over and over. They start making concessions. They're in a hurry. They need a deal. They want to get a deal. They want to get this over with. And so that is what I kind of make of the reluctant negotiator. Partly, it could also be a lack of confidence. They just don't want to be there. They don't want to deal with this. And this is also how mediators can help. This is why we are also such everyday superheroes. And people don't know what mediation is. A lot of people still don't know, and which is why there's a whole chapter in the book on mediation and introducing it to people. Because even to this day, how many people here have said when they're a mediator, they'll have someone say, "Oh, that's like arbitration, right?" Show of hands. That's like arbitration, right? No, not really. It's actually really different. They are both a forum that are outside of court for resolving a dispute, but otherwise really so people don't even know. And the mediator can really assist the reluctant negotiator.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah, good. There are a ton of great stories in the book, so I don't feel like this is a huge spoiler, but I wonder if you'd be willing to share the, do I call it the hostage story? The held up? Yeah.
The time I was held hostage at gunpoint in Russia, that one?
Yeah.
That or the 10 other hostage stories.
Right, just pick one. Yeah.
We'll just pick that one. Right. So the reason I included that is in the book is because it demonstrates a couple of points. One is storytelling. And the power of storytelling as a tool in negotiation. So getting back to that idea of the superhero, right? And I think of Batman. Let's remember actually that Batman does not have any superpowers. The dude drives a cool car.
Right. Yep.
And he's got a utility belt. He's got a utility belt that he pulls from, and he can swing from a rope or whatever it is. And that's his superpower. So can you, and you can have this utility belt. One of them is storytelling. So that's partly the function of including that, the story about the hostage situation. The other is to kind of flip the narrative a little. So this is a book on everyday negotiation. Well, Lucia, what are you doing telling me about this hostage situation in Russia after Yeltsin had dissected the government the day before when you were in the Kremlin for it? And this is not an everyday situation. What are you wasting my time with this? Aha! It's because how many times have you in your life been backed into a corner without the benefit of planning, feeling all alone, feeling desperate, and you have had to figure that out?
Yep.
On the spot. You have had to figure out how to negotiate your way out of it. That's why it's included there. And there we were, locked onto a ship, guns trained on us, rifles trained on us.
Oh my gosh.
And what were we going to do? What were we going to do in that situation? And it also demonstrates how sometimes inaction is action. And this is really sort of looping nicely back to your last question about that reluctant negotiator. Sometimes inaction is your next move. It's action. Because what we did is, wait, should I say what we did or should I not say what we did? I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, I want you to share.
Oh, you want me to share?
Say
All right.
it. We're on
So-
to say it. We want to
Okay.
know.
So
So-
because I'm obviously here, and what's funny is that when I aired this one on my podcast, I did it in 2 episodes. And so the first one, I left it as a cliffhanger. I said, there
Right.
we go. Got rifles trained on us, locked in.
Well,
What was our
we're
next
like-
move?
yeah, before you share it, then you talk about what are some of the things that you would suggest,
Yeah,
what are
I
some of
asked
the
the
different
listeners, I
ideas?
said, write
Yeah.
in and say, what are some ideas you have for what we should
Yeah.
have done? And you know what? Oh, I got to do it right now. Okay, what are some ideas people have? You're locked on a ship in Moscow, at the
Mhm.
Moscow port, with 6 guys in uniforms with rifles pointed at you.
Right.
What do you do? How do you get out? What do you do?
I feel like I would have completely frozen and just done whatever they would have said.
Okay, there's an option. What else?
Ask them for their supervisor.
There
Push
you
it up the chain. Intimidate them by implying that you have connections, and if they try anything, they're going to be in big trouble, and it's not going to not work out well for them.
Okay,
Great.
okay, I like that kind of be more authoritative than they are, or appear more authoritative.
Right. And
Okay.
create your own leverage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyone
Yeah.
else have any ideas? It's a tough one, right? It's a tough one. So
Yeah.
we stayed calm. And I thought to myself, I bet these guys have somewhere to be. We don't have anywhere to be.
Hmm.
Time favors us. I thought. This was my thinking. Time favors us. I wonder if they're on the clock. They're working some shift. I wonder if their shift is about to end. I wonder if they're really going to be willing to stick around here for very long, not getting paid. I wonder, who are these guys anyway? They're in uniforms. Who are they? Port Authority? I've got no idea.
Right.
And I said, we do nothing. We sit here and we stay calm and we talk amongst ourselves. I was with my parents, and we act just like the non-threatening American family that we are, and use the word American embassy every now and then, and we wait them out. Sure enough, after a couple hours, I'm not sure how long it was. I think it was a couple hours. They're getting shifty. They're starting to whisper among themselves. They're getting impatient. Their shift is probably over. They're not getting paid anymore. And then at one point, they threw open the door and they motioned with their rifles for us to go, and we scrammed.
Wow.
And that's when I got scared. That's when we were walking away and we're on the concrete concourse there. And I thought,
Mhm.
oh, are they going to shoot us in the back?
Oh my gosh.
And so I started zigzagging. We headed to highway and we flagged a cab and said, take us to the American Express office. And on the way, we saw bank runs. We saw bank runs. And then we got on this flight to Budapest. And the next day in Budapest, we found an American newspaper that Yeltsin had sacked his government. The day we were in the Kremlin, although I did not have anything to do with it. I didn't touch anything, I promise. And the ruble had been taken off the world exchange. So we fled Russia after being held hostage. So inaction as a form of action. We did not have leverage. We did not have power. We had neither in that situation. Well, we possibly had the leverage of time benefiting us because we didn't have to be anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like you kind of called their bluff, and thank goodness it seems like you're here. So it definitely worked out.
Yeah, my brother listened to the first episode where I had the cliffhanger, and he called me up. He said, I was so anxious listening to that episode. I could hardly stand it. I said, well, what, Mark, you know that we made it back. He said, no, I knew something had happened, but I wasn't sure. And I never heard the whole story.
Wow.
And it was just really funny that he had that reaction still.
Yeah.
And
well, the tricky thing is the time play is genius, but I also think it's a little bit uncertain, like the situation is evolving. I mean, it could be that waiting is going to mean that the situation gets more out of control. So you're making a little bit of a bet there.
Yep.
That waiting and using the time is going to benefit you as opposed to getting them more.
It was the same as being put in the corner. I was using the only thing I thought I had available to me. And it's possible that if it hadn't played out that way, I would have had to think of something else. One of the suggestions that one of the listeners called in for the podcast was, rush at the guards. And I don't know if that would have been such a great, I mean, they were armed and we weren't. So maybe not scatter in 3 different directions. So that, well, okay, we're still locked in on the ship though. We're locked in, how do we,
right.
Right.
You got to be sure you've been doing your plank twists all the time,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this gets back to, though, the benefit of getting in the practice of these everyday negotiations where the stakes are low and the habit of planning. Then when you are in a situation, hopefully not as extreme as that, but when you are in a situation where, we're negotiating now on the spot. I didn't get to plan.
Yeah.
You've already gotten in the habit of it, and you're going to be much more agile actually on your feet if you've been practicing it every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of the point.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm really glad that it worked out. Yeah, that's a great example. Just the importance of using everything that you've got, even if the only thing that you have is time, right? That you never feel completely powerless. I think there's always that moment in a mediation or a negotiation where I say, I want X, and they say, well, I want Y. And I just have that deer in the headlights feeling of like, what are we going to do? Like, is this going to be resolved? But I love that you're saying, no, you always have something. You always have some kind of a power or some kind of a play, even if it's just time. Like, you always have something. I think that's
yeah, I want to piggyback on that too, because some of the negotiation courses I teach, people always underestimate the power that they have. People don't understand what power, and time is a big one. But just I wonder if you've seen, if that's something that's correlated with gender. They talk about how women behave differently in negotiations, but I do kind of feel, and this may be a stereotyped conclusion, but men overestimate their power and women underestimate their power. And I think one of the beauties of that preparation is it really gets you to think through, like in the book, you provide a framework for thinking through, what are my other kinds of power here? And doing this preparation, how do I know that? Because it gives me a stronger hand when I come into the negotiation. So what do you think about that, Lucia?
I think that what you are also talking about is confidence. And maybe one of the reasons that, and we are stereotyping, except that it's also been what I've observed, and the data also bears it out, that the men negotiate with more power, is what you're saying. They have more, historically, they have more confidence about it, and they are doing it more often, which means then they're consistently contributing to the ongoing confidence because
Yeah.
it's a practice, it's a habit. And then if women aren't, it's awkward, it's clunky, and you don't have the confidence. So I believe it starts with confidence, and that starts inside you. And it starts with the self-talk of, I'm a negotiator.
Right.
I have this wonderful example.
Well, that's the cape. That's the, I'm the
That-
superpower, you
that's
know,
it.
right.
That's
yeah,
you know, and she's
exactly.
got the to-go coffee, and she's out walking the dog, and she's, you know, got probably 3 loads of laundry at home too. And she's, you know, she's making it happen. That's the cape. That's the, and you can imagine that cape, and you can hold all of that confidence in your heart. And it doesn't mean that you're not afraid. It means that you're courageous. And courage means doing something even when you're afraid. And great news, you're probably already doing it, and you're just not internalizing that voice that you're a negotiator. You don't think of it as negotiating. And it's a matter of being aware of it and honing that skill. I will approach people. I approached a 17-year-old woman who's now a freshman at UC Berkeley because she had started an inclusive dance program at a public high school in San Francisco. And I went to the performance because my son was one of the people who participated. And she got a grant so she could start it. And she got 5 people to participate. And that performance was 15 minutes long because that's about all they could do. And I see she's got it's a Saturday, and someone's doing the lighting, and they all have these t-shirts that say danceable. And then she presents them with flowers at the end. And I'm going, well, how did she get the flower? And how did she do those t-shirts? And how did she get these people to show up and do the lighting? And how did she get this space? And she's a negotiator. She's 17 years old. She's a negotiator. So I went up to her afterwards. I said, I'd like you to come on my podcast because you are such a great everyday negotiator. And she said, I don't know how to negotiate. I'm not a negotiator. She's at School of the Arts, and she's a classically trained ballerina. She said, I'm not a negotiator. And I said, that's exactly why I want you to come on the podcast, because you are illustrating my conceit beautifully. That you don't think of yourself as a negotiator, and yet look at all of the things you had to negotiate to make this happen. And she, by the way, is also a chemist. So, you know, a classic underachiever. This is why I have so much hope in this generation. And she is an example of a woman who, and look, she didn't think of herself as a negotiator, but she is. And so that's when I talk to help is answering your question, Colin, that power starts with an inner confidence that you can do it. And even if you don't win, you don't get everything you wanted. You don't get everything I've actually had some people message me and say, or respond to posts on LinkedIn, Lucia Kanter St is going to show you how to get everything you ever wanted. And I'm like, nope. I have never said that. I would never say that, because that's not what negotiation is. Negotiation is not a petulant demand. It is not an attitude of entitlement. It is a skill, and it is an art. And chances are, even if you didn't get a deal that day, you didn't finalize it, or you didn't get everything you wanted, you got some of what you needed, and you made progress.
Yeah.
And that's a win. Making progress is a win. It's not binary.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that, I'm sorry, Claire, I can't hesitate. I got one other thing that I want to ask about. I think that so much of people think negotiation, there's a lot of cultural baggage around the idea of negotiation is about power and forcing the other side to do what you want them to do. Like, I have this leverage and I'm going to make your life miserable if you don't do it. But I think that the integrative part, that kind of spirit of charisma and persuasion, and we could do this, I think that's, it really comes through in your writing. And I think that ballerina, you know, or that ballerina / chemist, you know, they may have this kind of energy to them and glow to them. And, you know, they come and say, I'm going to do this thing. And will you give me some free t-shirts? And will you help me do this? And will you do the lighting? And people say, yeah, I want to help you because you just seem so fun. I get so excited by your energy and your passion for this. And that's a power in a negotiation too. I love that you recognize that. And I think that unfortunately in our society, people don't see that as negotiation. Getting people to want to help you out is seen as, that's not negotiation, but forcing somebody to do something that they don't want to
Right.
do, that's seen as negotiation. The other thing I wanted to ask you, oh yeah, please.
Mhm.
No,
No, go. What did you want to ask me?
well, I wanted to say, I love the idea of coinage in a negotiation, something that really is not that costly to you, but it's really costly to the other side, really valuable to the other
Yeah.
side. And we talk in mediation, we talk all the time about the orange story, you know, of the sisters, and someone wants the peel and one wants the fruit. But
Yep.
I see every time I look at a negotiation, I'm always looking for the coinage. What's something that I can give them that costs me very little, but to them, it's really hugely valuable. And I just wanted to have you talk about that a little bit, because I'm sure you've got good stories about, you know, looking for those integrative, you know, value expanding opportunities.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. And that's where in the planning stages, I talk about make a concession plan. So I don't think I say this in the book, but in real life, I call it asking for a pony when you really want a kitten, right? So plan ahead of time what your concessions are going to be
Mhm.
and decoy concessions. And it's a little bit like what you're talking about, where you can show that you're giving up something, but it's not really a thing that matters that much to you. The other side doesn't know that though, not
Mhm.
necessarily, right? So you're making the concession, but you're not actually giving up much. And then that triggers, it has a better chance of triggering reciprocity. Because
Right.
you will get concessions from them.
Mhm.
They have decoy concessions. Maybe, who cares if the concessions give you what you need? It's sort of like the placebo effect in medication trials. Well, if it helps you, then does it really matter?
Yeah.
You know, and there are all kinds of opportunities where something actually seems like this is just fixed. There's only so much to go around here. And if you explore and if you think ahead of time about what is some non-monetary value, or what is
Yeah.
something that I can give that is really just, it's pretty easy for me, but it'll have a big impact on them, then you're going to, again, that utility belt, you're going to have a lot to work with and draw from at appropriate times in the
Yeah.
negotiation. And it's interesting, Colin, I couldn't help, and I'm not picking on you, Colin, I couldn't help that you just used power and leverage kind of synonymously. And I really do draw a distinction between the two, because you can be the more powerful party,
Mhm.
but be the party for whom that leverage doesn't favor. And then the classic example is parenting.
Excellent point. Yeah.
Right, it's parenting, right? We as the parent, we are the more powerful party. We're
Sure.
bigger, we have
That's our
more
role.
control over our muscles, we have a better experience in cognitive thinking
Mhm.
than a toddler. If we want our toddler to eat their broccoli, they've got the leverage. They're the only one who can eat the broccoli.
Right.
They're
Right.
refusing to eat the broccoli. How are you going to get him to eat the broccoli? What are you going to do?
Well, yeah, and it's hard to negotiate against somebody who's willing to scream until they throw up if they don't get their way, you know? You have to really be, you know, willing to
Exactly.
withstand that. Yeah.
And so that's where you got to peel back the layers of the, or peel the rind of the orange and go, well, okay,
Yeah.
what makes it so important to me that they eat their broccoli?
Yeah.
Well, I have to be a good parent, and they need good nutrition, and they need to be
Mhm.
healthy. And okay, so could you substitute something else for the broccoli? Could it be peas? Could it be cauliflower? Does it have to be green? What are the rules here? Could you get them to eat something else where you're saving face and getting what you need? They're eating the vegetables, and you can all move on with your lives. Can you leverage third parties? Can you invite Uncle Mark over and show him how he gobbles up his broccoli, and they want to be just like Uncle Mark, and so they start eating their broccoli too? There are options.
Wow, you're
Yeah.
good, because my kids actually do have an Uncle Mark, and we did that exact thing. Ooh, Mark loves his broccoli. Why don't you eat that? You know, one of the other things, and it's interesting, we used to do this with our toddlers. If you said to them, wear the blue shirt, they're like, no, I don't want to wear the blue shirt. But
Right.
you learn eventually to be like, okay, you can either wear the blue shirt or you can wear the purple shirt, and the purple shirt is too small and it's scratchy and they hate it. And then they go, blue shirt. So
Right.
like that's another thing, is
Yeah.
figuring out how to, instead of saying I'm going to force this choice down your throat
Yep.
and use my power to do it, and you're going to resist it, but you can't stop me. Or I'm going to create the illusion of choice. But I already know, it's like you say, I already know that that's a concession. They're not going to want to wear the purple shirt.
Exactly. And
Right.
that's in there too. It's
Yeah.
creating the illusion of a choice. And this is also a pro tip for mediators. And we use this as part of our Jedi mind tricks as well. Not that it's inauthentic. It's authentic. It's useful, where you say, so the illusion of a choice. Would you like to take your bath before or after dinner?
Mhm.
Okay, the bath is non-negotiable. I've
Right.
just given the illusion of a choice. And there's that self-determination aspect of it too,
Yeah.
which is sort of a thing for us mediators, isn't it?
Right.
The self-determination, the agency.
Yeah. So, okay. So I think you're really hitting on what really resonated with me in this book. And traditionally, when we think about negotiation, and when I think a lot of people shy away from it, and specifically feminine, those in the feminine role or feminine identity, why we typically shy away from negotiation is because the stereotypical view is that it's power and it's aggressive, and I'm going to force you to give in, and you're going to agree to this, or blah, blah, blah. And that doesn't jive with me, right? That doesn't, and I think a lot of people would say the same thing, that I don't want to do something if it results in me not being liked, or if
Right.
I feel like I won't be accepted, or if I won't be authentic, or if I'm shaming the other person. I don't want to engage in that activity.
Mhm.
And that's how negotiation has typically been portrayed. But repeatedly throughout your book, it is about empowering the other person and enforcing the self-determination. I was just looking at it. You ask a question in here and you say, one of the super questions is, what would it take for you to be happy with this? What would it take for you to eat the broccoli? And you're putting the choice back on them and saying, I want to help you be happy with this. But it's really coming from a place where both people are empowered, instead of I win by slaughtering you, right? It's such a different approach, but it's such a healthier approach. And
Yeah. So, all right, boy, there was a lot there. I would love to.
sorry, I had a lot of things to talk through.
I'm loving it. And I would like to unpack all of it. And we don't have time to unpack all of it. So I'm going to pick a couple of things. You talked about empowering the other person. And yes, so
Yeah.
start off with the curiosity about them. Show an interest in them. Listen to them. This is going to de-escalate. This is going to get that cortisol in the brain to kind of slow down. And you don't necessarily want to bombard them with questions necessarily. It's more about listening. There's a time and a place and an art to asking questions. And what I like about some of these negotiation skills is it's absolutely not about cramming anything down anyone's throat. It's artful and it's elegant and it's subtle and it's rapport building. So that's the other point I wanted to bring out of what you just said is rapport. It never goes out of style. So we oftentimes in our Zoom medium these days, which is so common, that's the step that is overlooked in my observation. Where people go, well, they have Zoom fatigue and let's just get right down to it. And then you wonder why you're at loggerheads. Well, if you didn't invest in the rapport building at any point at all, that could be the piece that is preventing a deal. And that is something that perhaps women have cultivated a little bit more than men. I don't know for sure. It's definitely something that is not a power play. That's not about, I'm imposing this on you, take it or leave it. This is going to be a struggle. That's being a Jedi.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it
These
shouldn't.
are not the droids you're looking for.
Right.
Yeah, I like that.
Right. Make it their idea. Right. This is also a mediator trick. Make it their idea. Now, sometimes you end up realizing that you may need to make a mediator's proposal and that's the thing that's going to get it done because of reactive devaluation or other heuristics that might be in play. Generally speaking, if you can get the other person to make it their idea. That's very empowering and validating, which leads to a deal.
Yeah. Good.
Colin looked like you're about to say something.
My
Maybe
head
not.
is filled with things to say, but I want to make space for other people. I mean, it's
Right.
just so rich. But
Mhm.
do other people have any comments? I know we're getting short on time. The other thing I will point out is we are going to have Lucia at our Inside the Mediation room this coming week. So it's a sort of hands on a different part of the elephant, but the conversation is not going to end here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Richard, do you have something you wanted to say?
No, I was wondering about the role of spontaneity. If everything is planned out, how are you available to be spontaneous?
Oh, it enables you to be spontaneous. That is the beauty of planning, is that you've got the plan and now you've got options.
Mhm.
So now you can go, all right, that was the plan. Does that work in this situation? Does that not work? It gives you the freedom to be spontaneous. So those two things are far from mutually exclusive. They are, in fact, complementary of one another.
Well, as a mediator, if I find a very sort of anal negotiator has planned out when they're going to release information to me and tell me, I find it's very difficult to really get spontaneity because they too much planned their negotiation strategy.
You're talking about working with a party who has
Yeah.
planned out their negotiation strategy. And so they are sort of time releasing information to you as a mediator.
Right.
Right. So what about these wonderful prefatory questions that we can use? Like, what would happen if, or imagine if, or I wonder if, to get them thinking in an imaginative, visual and visceral way that gets them a little bit away from their piece of paper.
I like that. I like that.
I love sentences that start with imagine, that start with I wonder, that start with what would happen if.
That's like
Right.
Jim's number one
I was
mediation
gonna say,
strategy. Yeah.
That's his favorite word. Yep.
It's incredibly effective, actually. And it just every day, just in everyday life, in everyday conversation. Or what do you mean by? Because people can also tend to use these buzzy words and phrases that when you say, well, what do you mean by that? One of the examples I use is when someone was talking about, don't you think we're losing our traditional values in this country? And I said, and I had this reaction inside. I had this spidey sense reaction. And I'm like, oh, let's just hold off on that for a second.
Right.
And I said, instead, I expressed curiosity. I said, what do you mean by traditional values? And she stopped dead in her tracks. She realized she did not know what she meant by traditional values. It had been something that's been repeated by her husband in the media. And she said, oh, well, I guess I'm not really sure. And it really got her, like, because it came up in the context of transgender sports. That's how it came up. And then she's talking about the trans, and it's unfair. And her husband is a swim coach, and it was really bothering him. And don't you think we're losing our traditional values? And I'm thinking, well, nonconformity is kind of a traditional value, isn't it? Like, that's what I'm thinking. Did I say that? No. I said, what do you mean by traditional values?
That's great.
Even a word like, there are a lot of loaded words that people use, even a word like feminist or patriarchy. Okay, well, what do you mean? What do you mean when you say that?
Yeah.
And you might learn that they're not sure. And it can be asked in a really inviting way, not like they're challenging them. You're inviting them to tell you more, like, oh, I'm curious. You've got my attention. Tell me more. I want to know more. Keep them talking.
Gets back to the listening.
Exactly.
Back to the listening, the number one.
I love it. I love it. Okay.
Just to quickly tie two things together. In every mediation, there's also a sub-negotiation between the mediator and the respective parties. And the smartest thing the mediator can do is absorb their plan, absorb whatever they decided they wanted to go with, to become one with them, rapport. As they experience you to be one with them, they will then be open to your facilitative lead, which might well include language like "I'm curious" and "I wonder" and "might it be" and "perhaps."
Imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
and it's also, Jim, what I like about that too, it's the meeting them where they are. It's not
Yeah.
about you. It's not about
Yeah.
you. So if we could set our egos aside a little more as non-mediators, people who are not attorneys and mediators and training, and just go, let's just listen to this person. I don't have to agree with them. And that is what is so elegant about listening and empathy. It doesn't mean agreeing. You concede nothing by doing those things, by employing those tools.
That's good. Okay, in 30 seconds, can you tell us what are some of your next steps? So with the book, are you doing more podcasts? Are you traveling? Are you going to be using it in a class? What are some of your plans?
I have already been approached to follow up with a workbook, which I think is a really good idea.
Yeah.
And a card deck and a journal. So I've got some interest in that already. And I'm definitely going to be on the speaking circuit. I get about 6 to 12 requests every week to be interviewed or speak on a pod or do a keynote or something. So really it's all for the forces of good to get everybody thinking of themselves and as an everyday negotiator and harnessing that. It's really transformative stuff. And I wouldn't be doing it unless I thought it would make a difference. My husband retired earlier this year. We could go to Italy and sip limoncello, okay? So I want to keep doing this while it's still purposeful, while it's still making some kind of impact, because otherwise it's just contributing to the noise, and I don't need to do that.
you can do
Sounds
both.
It sounds like you're kind of a superhero. Just a little bit. Yeah. Oh, thank you for doing this work. Thank you for writing this book. I love it. It has been great to get to spend time with you.
And my
Thanks,
dog
Lucia.
did not, he's sitting here looking at me. He did not bark. He's such
Great.
a good boy.
There you go. The Italian
Great.
worked. You set him
Yeah.
straight. Good
Yeah.
negotiation. Yeah.
So available on Amazon. Fantastic book. Love it. I like the Kindle version. Audiobook coming. Yeah. Thank you so
Audiobook,
much.
that's a next step. Audiobook is under construction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Thank you, Lucia. Good to see you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks for
everyone.
coming.
Thank you.